Welcome, everyone, to the Super Connector, where we talk about all things related to the world of influence, everything from sales to leadership, personal branding, networking, and my personal favorite, how to win friends and influence people. Today, we have a special guest, Dominic Caminata. Dominic is the founder and CEO of Grosso University, a sales training and business consulting company for the home improvement industry. He's a sales trainer, motivational speaker, and sales leadership specialist. He also has his own podcast, which you can find on YouTube under Grosso University. He's had on some high-profile guests like Jeb Blount and the Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort. I'll post the link to his sales training website and the YouTube channel in the comments down below. So, Dominic, I'm so glad to have you on. We met at the Dallas conference, the Dallas Win the Storm conference, and I walked up to your booth and I said, man, your podcast setup looks amazing, man. I want to have something that looks like that. So I'm so happy to finally have you come on my show. And how are you doing?
No, it's an honor, Stephen. I'm doing fantastic, and I just want to congratulate you on the Super Connector podcast. So you yourself have also had some pretty high-level guests on, and that's just a tribute to the content that you're delivering to the world, and clearly that the message you're trying to convey is much needed. So again, congrats to you, and thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you. I love podcasting. It's so great.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about Grosso University to start?
Yeah, so it goes pretty far back. I actually first got into the home improvement industry in 2010, and I started as an outside salesperson for a company called Mad City Roofing, Siding, and Windows. And at the time, I didn't know anything about sales. I didn't know how to close the door with the wind behind me, so to speak. I was very new, very timid, didn't know what it meant to go for the no with a assertive confidence. I kind of had a wishbone instead of a backbone, so to speak. So it was a little difficult for me in the very beginning of my career. But thankfully, the company that I started working with, Mad City, had what I consider to be the holy grail of sales in this industry, which was the Grosso 10-step sales methodology. And without that, I would have had no shot in hell at making it in this business. And literally just step by step, like a paint by number system, following that Grosso sales methodology, I was able to be the first $1 million producer at Mad City. As a matter of fact, in my first 6 months on the job, I wrote up 900,000 in replacement windows, which at the time was pretty unheard of for that company. And my first 3 years following the Grosso sales methodology, I was able to be Salesman of the Year, which was one of my first big achievements in the home improvement space and the home improvement industry.
Yeah.
The big pivotal moment for me in my life, because Rick Grosso is the guy, he was my mentor. He was like the Zig Ziglar of my life in the home improvement space. And watching his training videos, listening to his audio cassettes, he had 2 really heavy hitting sales training audio sets that he sold. One was the Yes, I Am a Closer, and the other one was Ready, Aim, Goal. So a lot of mindset motivation, but a lot of real hardcore sales strategy. And I would listen to that stuff for hours and hours and hours in my car. One thing I did early in my career is I turned my car into my mobile library. And I looked up to this guy. He was literally an inspirational figure for me. He was like a celebrity, and I attributed much of my success to his teachings. Well, when I first got recognized as Salesman of the Year, we had an awards ceremony at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. And at the time, Ruth's Chris was very high level for me because I was doing well, but I still wasn't like, making it rain year after year, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so going to Ruth's Chris and having the awards ceremony and getting recognized as Salesman of the Year is a very emotional moment in my career. And Rick Grosso was a special guest. He actually came there in person. And that was my first time really getting to meet him in person, getting to know him. And of course, he's sharing stories about training and consulting businesses all over the country and how he runs these big seminars and the lifestyle and the travel and all the success. And I made it my personal mission from that evening on that I wasn't going to just master Rick Grosso's methodology and his sales training. I wanted to be him, period. I made up my mind. We talk about the power of the made up mind a lot in our training. I made up my mind at that moment. I wanted to be Rick Grosso. Now, in order to achieve this, I knew that I needed a case study. No one was going to hire me as a sales trainer or a consultant unless I had a proven case study that I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
So that really became the burning desire that I had, the fuel that really propelled me forward in my career at Mad City. And essentially, what ended up happening is I became the sales leader at Mad City in 2012. So it was my third year in. I got my hands on the steering wheel as a sales trainer, sales leader. And basically, from that point on, I grew the sales team there from about 8 million to doing about 100 million in 7 years. And one thing I'm really proud of is I had 55 lead babies. I mean, sales professionals. Just kidding. 55 sales, high performance sales individuals, and cumulatively, they were closing at over 50%. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. There's a lot of hard times, a lot of trial and error. I made as many mistakes as anyone cares to make in their lifetime. But that's one thing. One of my greatest strengths is I'm not afraid to fail forward. I like to think of myself as a heat-seeking missile. So you continue to move forward through all the obstacles and course corrections, but you still keep moving forward no matter what. And that was one of my big successful moments. Well, it actually turned out in 2019, Rick Grosso announced that he was doing his last ever closers camp, last ever. And this was in Washington, D.C. And I knew that if I was serious about taking over this guy's legacy, this was my chance. This is it.
Yeah.
So I was able to get approval from the owner of Mad City, Nathan Richmond, to go to Washington, D.C. and participate in Closers Camp. Because those of you that don't know Rick Grosso's Closers Camp, it was a sales training event, but it was also a competition. So you literally compete against hundreds of other hungry sales warriors to see who's the best, who
Yeah.
knows this stuff better than anybody. So, of course, my first goal was to go down there and be the last ever Closers Camp champion, mop the floor with everybody. And then after the event was over, I took Rick Grosso out to a French style bistro downtown Washington, D.C., because I knew he loved French style bistros, and ordered some really fancy wine because I knew he loved really fancy wine. Got him feeling real good. And I just let him know that the reason I was at Closers Camp was, of course, pay tribute to him, be at his last ever training event. But I just wanted to let him know in person that I'm here to take over his legacy. And we talk a lot about in sales, you got to assume the order. We don't ask permission for the sale, we assume it.
Yeah.
So that's the strategy that I use. And his response was, I couldn't think of anybody better.
Wow.
So that was really the inception of Grosso University in 2019. And honestly, I'm super grateful. And, you know, one thing I just want to announce here, it's more meaningful to me than ever before that we've done this and paid tribute to my mentor, Rick Grosso. He has actually since passed away. He passed away April 8th, 2024. And I attribute literally everything, all my success in my career, to his teachings. And of course, I continue to build it off of there. So, but that's how Grosso University came to be. And now my simple mission here is to create the premier sales training consulting business in the history of this industry. A very small goal.
Yeah.
And I want Grosso University to be a household name, not just known for sales training and leadership coaching, but I want Grosso University to grow to be the place that companies go to when they want to enhance any department in their organization. So marketing, sales, production, operations, anything you need from phone call to install. I want Grosso University to be that first go-to household name that people trust to help grow their business.
Great. What a great story. Of course, I'm very, sorry to hear about, the passing of your mentor. You had explained that what I heard you say in the beginning is that, what you wanted to be was Grosso himself.
Yes.
And it seems as though you somewhat reached that goal, I guess I could say, when you had that meeting with him and said, I want to take over your legacy. I like how you didn't ask, you just said, I am going to take over your legacy. I'm sure he appreciated that.
Yeah.
And,
I just want to let you know in person, face to face, that the reason I'm here is to take over your legacy. And in terms of being Rick Grosso, and this is one thing I was able to let him know before he passed, is, I'll spend the rest of my life trying to fill those gigantic shoes, because the guy truly was a legend. And, no one can ever, replace Rick Grosso, but I'm going to make it my personal mission to try to leave the same level of impact on the industry that he did. So
great. All right. So, we already went through how you made your way into sales and how your sales journey started. So at what point did you decide that you wanted to move into coaching?
So I actually naturally had a passion for sales leadership before I ever became a sales leader. So even early in my career, my first 3 years at Mad City, I was the go-to guy that would have people riding along to observe, like, because everyone's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Did you read the sales training book? It's all right here. Did you listen to the Rick Grosso CDs? It's all right there." Because I was like borderline obsessed with mastery of this stuff. But a
Mhm.
lot of people want to know what I was doing. So I'd invite them, come observe me and watch me in the house, record me on audio, listen to what I say, listen to what I do, and not afraid to take people under my wing and role play with them and coach them. So I always had kind of a knack for wanting to help people. I just naturally get gratification on helping others succeed. So literally, when I finally got the reins as the sales leader, got my hand on the steering wheel, I felt like I found my true calling in life. Like this is what I was born to do, because it just became such a fulfilling and gratifying and humbling and amazing experience, investing my heart and soul into providing the training and the tools and the coaching and then watching other people change their life on behalf of the gift that you're giving to them, right? So again, you're paying that gift forward to others. And I've had some crazy situations where people literally came into my organization living out of their car, like homeless. And you give them this gift of this sales training and sales leadership and mentorship, and you become that coach that they need. And 2 years later, you see them buy their dream house. They have their sports car in the garage. They got a new fiance or whatever. You see their
Yeah.
life completely transformed before your eyes, and knowing that you had a level of influence on that is super gratifying for me. So that's when I really became kind of addicted to sales leadership and sales coaching.
Yeah.
And again, I spent a great chunk of my entire career literally training and coaching salespeople relentlessly, trying to provide them with all the tools and foundational support they need. And I always defined my leadership style as selfishly selfless. And the reason why I describe it that way is because I knew that to be an effective leader, I need to put the needs and desires and success of the team that I'm leading ahead of my own, right? I need to make their personal success my top priority. But selfishly, I knew that behind the scenes, if I could make them successful enough, my success would be an inevitable byproduct of theirs. And it's kind of like Zig Ziglar always used to say, if you want to get what you want, you help enough other people get what they want. So that's what I knew was kind of destined to be. And I was wildly successful as a sales leader. And now my mission is very simple. I want to continue to share this gift with as many salespeople, sales leaders, and entrepreneurs as humanly possible, and help the industry thrive, really enhance the professionalism of this industry in a big way. Because this industry has always been renowned for just being wild, wild west. A lot of people shooting from the hip, not a lot of professionalism. And it's crazy to think in sales that you can make doctor level income and there's no certification, there's no license or permit. You don't need any formal education. So we're trying to change the perception here. And we want people to come into Grosso University and think of this is sincerely like getting your college degree in sales. And we test and certify reps, we graduate them, and we continue the post-training education and support. And it's been a very amazing journey. So this has literally been a dream of mine since 2010. And I've been literally living the dream ever since I founded Grosso University. This is what I want to do the rest of my life.
That's amazing. And, I'm so glad to hear that. It's a very inspirational story. And I have been recently reading, well, I'm sure you know, because you're in sales leadership, John Maxwell. I've been
Mm-hmm.
reading John
Yep.
Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Power. And
Yep.
his very popular book. And one of the laws is the law of legacy. And
Mm-hmm.
I heard you in there, and I don't even know if you used the word legacy, but what I kept on hearing in my mind was legacy, legacy, legacy. When you were talking about how you were training people to be leaders themselves.
Yep.
And so when it comes to legacy, do you think that you're more concerned with legacy than income now? Or how has building a legacy for yourself played a role in in your journey since being a trainer, and how has it evolved over time?
Yeah, the legacy in which I leave on this world is something I think about an awful lot. And this is one thing I always admired about Rick Grosso, and this is something I'm learning more. Obviously, since his passing, I get people that I've never met before reaching out to us, basically sharing how Rick Grosso changed their life. Just to have that vast of an impact across an entire industry and change so many lives, it was very inspiring to me and something that I'm going to strive to live up to. But yeah, the legacy and impact I leave in this world and on this and this industry as a whole is something I think about a lot. And of course, we're trying to keep up with this rapidly evolving world that we're living in. That's why I don't know if you've seen our main slogan and tagline. It's legendary training for the modern world. So we're honoring the legendary legacy of Rick Grosso, but we're also doing it in a way that's cutting edge and, of course, relevant for the trials and tribulations that people are going through today. But that's a big part of my mission is I want to help as many people as possible, give this gift to as many people as possible, change their lives. And this is why I can see myself doing this the rest of my life. And I'm talking the rest of my life until my last breath,
Yeah.
is because I get so much fulfillment on helping others succeed. And it's crazy, Stephen. Like, I'll go to events. I went to a Goldman Sachs event, and this is an example of why I love what I do. And early on at Grosso University, was actually during the beginning of the pandemic, because actually during our first year was when the world shut down, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of companies were trying to crack the code on virtual selling. They're like, how the heck do we keep the doors open, keep business as usual if we can't get into people's houses? Like, what do we do? And right before all this happened, I happened to spend an insane amount of time breaking down our entire sales process step by step and reimagining every single step for virtual selling.
Okay.
And I not only reimagined it, but I put it to the test. I was selling replacement windows and one-day bath systems virtually at a 40% demo to close ratio without setting foot in people's houses over Zoom, just like this.
Yeah.
So I feel like I cracked the code. And then I did an educational webinar on virtual selling. You want to learn how to virtual sell, come and attend our webinar. And I actually had recordings of me virtually selling people and showing people exactly how it unfolds. And we had about 750 people on that webinar because a lot of people were just dying to know, like, how do we do this?
Yeah.
And then fast forward a couple of years later at this Goldman Sachs event, I get this random guy that comes up to me and shakes my hand. He's like, I've wanted to meet you for a long time. I just wanted to shake your hand. I wanted to thank you personally. I'm like, I'm sorry, what's your name again? And he's like, you don't know me, but a couple of years ago, you did a webinar on virtual selling. And I wanted to let you know it was because of that webinar that I was able to stay in business.
Wow.
I'm like, oh my God, I literally felt my heart skip a beat. I'm just like, this is the legacy. This is exactly what I want to be able to do for people. Cause again, they're not a customer of mine. They're not a client. I didn't charge them any money for any service, right? It was just an educational webinar. And we tend to deliver a lot of value in our webinars. But literally for him to come up to me and say it was because of that webinar, he's able to stay in business, the impact that leaves on me and on the in the industry at large is phenomenal. And I want to keep doing that. So I get a lot of neurotransmitter, dopamine, serotonin rush when I
Yeah.
start hearing that stuff.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
very addicting.
Oh, yeah. And when I think of myself, I'm sure you and a number of people watching will know Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And
Yep.
right at the bottom is the stuff which is just like food, procreation, water, the essentials that we need. And right at the top is the self-actualization. And it
Yep.
seems to me when I listen to you speak that you have reached that self-actualization. And I would say that that self-actualization is living in a state of abundance. And of course, what better state to be in which you will sell the most than being in a state of abundance, because people can just sense that coming off of you, and
You know,
so
there's two things I think about a lot, right? Because I'm definitely a firm believer in abundance and prosperity and all this, but I'm also a firm believer in contentment. So it sounds kind of like a dichotomy, right? It's like, how can you have abundance and be content? And what I mean by contentment is simply being grateful for what you have and, feeling wholesome and feeling complete in your life. Because again, I'm a firm believer, always growing. If you're green, you're growing. If you're ripe, you're rod. You want to keep pushing the envelope and get outside your comfort zone. And this is why I do things intentionally like bodybuilding and these half marathons and tough mudders. Like I constantly try to stay uncomfortable. So I want to continue to grow. But it's also one thing that I feel personally that I try to strive for is contentment. Just feeling content with where I'm at, what I'm doing to contribute to this world, gratitude, being grateful for where I'm at, what I have, while striving to get to that next level. So it's kind of a balancing act for me. But I think that's one of the most optimal levels of happiness there is being truly content and having that gratitude attitude for all the amazing things and wonderful things you have in your life. And as it turns out, it's one of the things that people struggle with is being grateful and showing gratitude for what you have. And I find that the more grateful I am and the happier that I am, my mindset, my level of happiness, those other things tend to come to me faster. I don't know if you ever heard of Albert Schweitzer, but he has a very famous quote that I recite quite often. He says, "Success is not the key to happiness. It's happiness is the key to success." And I think about that often, that if I live my life as a happy, positive, grateful individual, full of love and full of positivity and passion, that all those other things that I'm striving for are going to come to me a lot easier. So it's kind of like what you talk about, right? How to win over friends and influence people. A lot of it is just how you carry yourself. Am I going around? Am I a positive, joyful individual? Do I make people feel important and special when they're around me? Like I truly care, right? So little things like that.
That's great because I did a journaling method. I say that gratitude is a muscle, something that you need to flex and work on every day, just like bodybuilding.
Yes.
And I did an exercise once where I had a mentor, not in sales, but in something else. And his recommendation was that I do gratitude lists every day. And they got longer and longer every day, of course,
Yeah.
right? As you grow that muscle. And eventually they got so long that in the morning I would have nothing, couldn't think of anything else to write, but I had to write more. And I started writing things that I was grateful for that other people I cared about in my life were receiving. So I was
Yeah.
grateful so it was amazing that it got me out of myself and put me in a very selfless mindset.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I noticed that when I am content, I'm doing cold calls right now. No matter what script I use, no matter what techniques I use, if I'm in a content mood, I do
Hmm.
incredible on those cold calls. People just sense it off of me. They enjoy talking to me.
Yeah.
I could be selling them something that's not even really worth it for them. Not that I would do that, but they'd still probably book an appointment with me just because of that mood that's radiating off of me. And I think that's really important. Actually, I think that would be a good question is how can you speak to how the importance of the difference between how you carry yourself and the vibes that you radiate from yourself compared to an actual technical script that is supposed to work, because they're two different things. And if you can't combine them, then it doesn't really work, does it?
Yeah. So when I first trained sales professionals, of course, we train them the foundational fundamentals of how to play the game. I always like to refer to golf lessons. So if you go take golf lessons, the golf coach is going to take you through step by step, the proven way to grip the club, how to position the ball in your stance, how to do a proper backswing and follow through, keep your eye on the ball, all those things, the step by step fundamentals that almost 100% of golfers are going to rely on to play the game. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean when I take those golf lessons that I can go on the PGA Tour and beat Tiger Woods one-on-one, right? It's like, now what I need to do is take those foundational training elements and through thousands of repetitions, figure out my authentic swing. You ever see the movie The Legend of Bagger Vance
It was a
with
long time ago I
Will
saw it.
Smith and Matt Damon?
Yes.
He talks about his
That's at least 10 years ago, I think that movie came out, wasn't it?
Yeah, I love that movie. There's
Yeah.
something about it. It's a nice emotional. I think it's really well done. But anyway, Will Smith talks about finding your authentic swing, right? And that's what salespeople need to do is after they learn the scripts and learn the system through repetition and repetition, now they need to figure out their true authentic way of delivering the message that works for them and for them alone. Because every single individual is different. The way I'm going to communicate and present to a prospect is going to be a heck of a lot different than the way you would. And more often than not is going to be different than everybody else. But it's no different than a movie script. You ever see actors when they're first reading a movie script, they're having the round table discussion,
Yeah.
and they're literally just reading word for word out of the book. it sounds robotic. It doesn't sound authentic. It doesn't sound natural. There's no emotion or passion. They're just reading it just to go through the motions. But then when you see the final motion picture, and of course they got background music, the actor worked on the body language and the facial expressions and the right tonality and voice inflection, all the things that make communication, the information, the communication they're trying to give so impactful. It can bring tears to your eyes when you hear it. That's because they've learned it so well that it becomes their voice, right? They've learned it so well that it becomes their voice. And authenticity is one of the most powerful things that we can do. And it's never going to happen when you first learn a script. So it's important for anybody watching this, if you're training and coaching salespeople, of course, make it mandatory that they learn the foundational elements of how to play the game. Make them learn the scripts, make them recite these things forwards and backwards. It's good. But then after they learn those foundational elements, now we need to spend time with them working on the other 93% of communication, which is how I'm delivering the message. Because you've heard this before, but it's worth repeating. It's not what you're saying that matters. It's how the prospects perceive what you're saying that matters. And that is something that's going to be worked on after they learn the script. So we spend a lot of time, and Rick Grosso is always famous for saying that when you walk into a house, you got to think to yourself, who you are speaks so loudly, they can hardly hear a word you're saying. Meaning that they're buying the energy. Again, they're buying the emotion, the passion, the enthusiasm, right? Your confidence level when you enter that house. And I talk to salespeople about this often. I'll ask salespeople, what's the biggest sales streak you've ever had? And I've had some salespeople say, I've closed 5 in a row. And then some say, I've closed 10. I had one salesperson that claimed they closed 40 sales in a row. Now think of that, 40 sales consecutively, back to back.
Yeah.
Now, how do you feel after closing 10 deals in a row, 20 sales in a row? What's your confidence level when you walk into the next house? There's no way in hell these people are not buying from me. That's your attitude, right?
Yeah.
You walk into a house, you're radiating such a high level of confidence. People can feel that energy. Sales is a transference of feeling and emotion.
Yeah.
And also the opposite is true. If I've gone 0 for 5 and I had a really tough stretch in sales and I have this negative energy, these negative thoughts creeping into my mind about my ability as a salesperson, that translates into a negative outward appearance towards others and gives them negative thoughts and feelings about me as a trusted advisor. And often that negative spiral keeps going.
Yeah.
So that's why it's really important that if I'm in sales or sales leadership, that I really work on doing everything I possibly can do. Like you said, it's like training a muscle daily to wake up, showing gratitude, working on happiness. Happiness is like any regimen. It takes discipline. It takes consistency. I have to actually work at happiness. Happiness is not going to just fall in your lap, especially with all the negative forces around us every single day, right? There's plenty of that going around. But if I can get in the right state of mind before I enter that house and get enthusiastic and passion. I was just talking to a sales rep recently that has been at 71% closing for the last 5 years in a row. And he says the 2 things that I focus on is radiating a lot of passion, a lot of joy, and a lot of confidence when I enter that house. Confidence, passion, and energy. And people can just feel that energy. It's magnetic in nature. And that's the type of people that people want to work with.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, there's a lot to it. We can talk literally for hours about it.
Oh,
But
yeah, definitely.
that's something that's not talked about enough, though, frankly, in the industry, is that 93% of communication that is going to either make or break a sale.
And that would be something a communications professor told me that would be called paralinguistics. So that's basically body language, tonality, the way you carry yourself. And we pick up, our subconscious minds pick up on those things. That's why we can tell if there's an incongruency in the salesman between what they're saying, but what their body and their tonality is saying, then there starts to become a mistrust. Like, hey,
Well, give me an example. Yeah. So here's an example. My son's name is Elijah. He's 8 years old.
Yeah.
I can say the exact same thing to him, but it's going to have totally different meanings depending on my tonality and body language.
Yeah.
So I could be like, Elijah, come over here. Or I could be like, Elijah, come over here.
Yeah.
It's going to have 2 totally different meanings, right? It's
Oh, yeah.
So that's just an extreme example, but that's the stuff that we have to work on. And often what I recommend for salespeople to do is record yourself, listen to yourself, and take notes on your body language, your voice inflection. Actually, Next level, if you can get a full video recording of yourself doing a full presentation and maybe hire a friend or a family member or a peer in your organization to do it with, that's going to be one of the greatest things you can do to self-improve.
Yeah.
And we kind of joke about it. We say, you know, one of the best John F. Kennedy quotes is, "Ask not what your company can do for you, but what you can do for your company." A lot of salespeople wait for an outside perspective to watch them and observe them and see what's going on, but they can do that on their own accord. And that's where you're going to pick up on the 93% of communication, how effective you are and how you're conveying the message.
Great. So it seems like in your university, you certainly go over a lot of mindset training. I guess maybe I would call it mindset training, or
Yeah. Oh,
working on
yeah.
the mindset of the employee, of the sales professional. Now,
Yes.
I have an interesting question. Actually, I was talking about this the other day with a good friend of mine, and he said, "Well, these scripts that you're writing out, you're trying to change them around, but you might go in there without a script at all, but just be in a good mood and be able to sell. Okay, so it
Mm-hmm.
might be different from one person to another, which you just stated.
Yes.
Now, if you took, say, very different styles of sales, like for example, we'll take a coach like Jeremy Miner.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll take a coach like Andy Elliott. They're quite different. Okay.
Yep.
Andy Elliott's very like Navy SEAL, six pack, speaking out loud, projecting confidence. I'd love to have him as a personal trainer.
Yes.
And if you, however, there's going to be people taking those trainings at various levels of success. Now, if you
Mm-hmm.
took, they're very different styles of training, but if you took the top salesman using those techniques on various different styles of training, what would be the most common similarities between them?
Yep. Yeah. So that's what's cool. You're familiar with Rilla Voice, right?
No, I'm not.
So Rilla Voice is an AI speech analytics and voice transcription technology in the home improvement industry. It's the leading sales coaching technology that there is. So essentially what it does, it's an app you have on your phone. The sales rep goes into a home, records the audio of the conversation, and it records the entire sales encounter from start to finish. After the appointment is over, it automatically uploads the recording, scores it, and transcribes it and provides immediate feedback. But essentially, what we have access to now is data. So
Yep.
we're actually turning sales into a data-driven sport. So to your question is, what exactly are the top 1% of closers doing consistently? Let's just put the sales system aside. What are the top performers doing that average salespeople are not doing across the board? And right now we have access to over 1 million fully recorded and scored sales encounters. It's about 100 years worth of data, just to put in perspective.
Yeah.
So what we've learned is there are really obvious areas that top performers are consistently above average salespeople across the board. And one of them is listening. Top performers tend to listen more. And what we mean by that is they maintain a balanced talk ratio when they're in front of a prospect. So a lot of salespeople love to talk. And the reality is, though, selling is not telling.
Yeah.
The people that talk too much, again, the prospect's going to tune them out very, very quickly. So now the goal is a 50-50 balanced talk ratio, but we find that on average, the top 1% of sales professionals talk between 45 and 60% of the time. So meaning that the prospect's talking 55 to 40% of the time, but the whole sales encounter is a back and forth conversation. So they listen more. There's a reason why the Lord gave us one mouth and 2 ears, right? And listening is a lot more than just waiting for your turn to talk. And this is where a lot of salespeople need training on this. Listening is not a passive strategy. It's one of the most difficult and active sales strategies there is. It takes discipline, because I guarantee, as I'm talking right now, Stephen, you probably have a voice in your head thinking about what you're going to say based on what I'm saying, right? We got these monologues that go
The
on.
next question I'm going to ask you.
Exactly. You're thinking
Keep
about it
this
right now,
going.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But the problem is, like, if I'm in a house and it's me and John and Mary homeowner or multiple decision makers, it's not 3 people having a conversation, it's 6. So as I'm talking, they got monologues going on in their head. And as they're talking, I got this monologue going on in my head. No one's really listening to anybody, right? And I'm guilty of this often with my wife. Admittedly, she'll be looking right at me. I'm looking right at her. She's telling me something important. And I don't know if I got a monkey with symbols going on in my head or something, or I got this loud monologue. My mind's drifting off in the la la land. She's like, did you hear what I just said? I'm like, yo, of course, honey. She's like, okay, what did I just say? I'm like,
Oh
oh, you
boy.
got me.
Yeah.
Like, oh boy.
Yeah.
So to truly listen means I need to shut off that monologue in my head, and I need to open up all my brain power to focus on their body language, their facial expressions, the tone of their voice. And the way we define true deep listening at Grosso University is you're listening with your ears, your eyes, and your intuition. So I'm listening to what they're saying, certainly. I'm looking at their facial expression, seeing, okay, does the words that they're saying match what their face is telling me? And then, of course, the emotion behind how they're presenting themselves, the customer's energy that they're actually emitting. Because again, we human beings have this incredible ability to sense emotion. Then after they say what they're going to say, I pause for a second, process the information, and then I respond. But it provides a lot better pacing. And these people feel like for the first time in a long time, someone's actually truly listening to them. Because think about it, Stephen, how often does anyone truly listen to anybody anymore?
Not much at all, really, especially with all the noise that we hear on the internet.
Exactly. And then another thing that was really obvious is top performers ask 5 times more questions than average salespeople do. So average salespeople will do a decent job asking questions in the beginning of a sales encounter when they're trying to get to know this person. Maybe they do a survey of some sort. But then as soon as their sales hat goes on, they start talking about their company and their product. The questions drop off a cliff, like a lot of the company's warranties, they prorate over time. Whereas top performers, because they prepare in advance what the questions they're going to ask, they ask questions in a linear fashion throughout the entire sales encounter. And the goal is to keep the spotlight on the homeowner. Are you familiar with the voice activated spotlight analogy?
No.
So every time you're in front of a prospect in their house at their kitchen table, you always picture there's a voice activated spotlight above the kitchen table, and it only shines on the person who is talking. So every time I'm flapping my jaw, talking about how great I am, how amazing my company is, all this other stuff, the spotlight's on me. And you may think that's good, but if the spotlight's on me, where's the prospect left?
Yeah.
In the dark. If I
Yeah.
leave them in the dark too long, what's going to happen? They're going to tune me out entirely. And there's been a lot of science and research behind this, but your prospect will typically only sit through about 5 or 6 statements in a row before they tune you out entirely.
Yeah.
So the simple name of the game, instead of me saying it, because selling is not telling is not selling, how can I frame this in the form of an open-ended question to get the homeowner to tell me? Because anything I say is an opinion. Anything they say, they own it, and it's part of their belief system. And plus, it keeps the spotlight on them. And that should be the goal, right? Because who's this really about? It's not about us, it's about them.
Yeah.
So the more I can keep the spotlight on them, keep them talking, it's going to make them feel heard. It's going to make them feel like someone's truly listening. You're going to demonstrate a lot more empathy as a result. Like they feel like you truly understand them. And this is what top performers are brilliant at, because they participate in what I call next level preparation. Think of stand-up comedy. How much time is spent preparing for a 1-hour stand-up comedy act? It's usually a full year of preparation.
Yep.
And they plan out the jokes, how they're going to deliver them, the tonality, the voice inflection, body language, facial expressions, the animated stuff that they do. They also write into their act laughter. They write into their act, if I ask this question to the audience and I get this, or this type of response, which jokes can I pivot off? So it's planned improv. They plan everything. None of it is, they never wing any of it, right? So we can do the same thing in sales. We can plan out throughout our entire survey, measure, company story, product presentation in advance. What questions can I ask throughout to keep them talking? And then you'd be surprised to know that top performers also, they're more compliant to following a system. So the most important thing to take away there is they don't shoot from the hip. Now, they do have some level of creativity and, of course, personalization and being a chameleon. But top performers are typically, on average, 70% compliant to a process. And the other 30% is for personalization, being a chameleon, and thinking outside the box, being creative. Whereas the average salespeople or salespeople that aren't as consistent, they're about 20% compliant. So 80% of the time, they're just making things up as they go. Now, some people can get away with that, but across the board, the data shows that most people are more successful when they stick to a process. So we always say the system reigns supreme. Now, it doesn't mean you're a robot word for word. It means, though, I need to have a method to the madness. I need to have a plan for everything that I do and follow a process consistently. And now I admittedly am not a natural born salesperson. So for me, this is something important is I leaned heavily on the system to be successful. This is what I love about our system, as a matter of fact, is I don't have to be a natural born salesperson to have consistent results. And Rick Grosso always preached to me is like the best, most consistent salespeople are not born from the womb that way. They're trained to be the best. They are trained to be shining stars in the industry. So again, I can go on a lot about this stuff, but the cool thing is now with data, we can actually tell you, putting the system aside, there are certain categories of performance that top performers do consistently better and more frequently than average salespeople.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you spoke about the data because I just recently read something, I believe it was from a software called Apollo, where there was a study done and it was found that on cold calls, and it was that same specific number, but it was specifically 60% of the sales professional talking and 40% of the client talking, which showed the best results. And another interesting thing, which was so minute, but when they phoned and they would say, "Hi, my name's Stephen from XYZ company," instead of saying, "How are you?" they would say, "How have you been?" And simply that "How have you been?" instead of "How are you?" Showed a 30% higher, a 30% increase in positive response rate. And this is done through recordings over, well, who knows how many recordings. And so this data process and tweaking your performance according to that data, I think is a really excellent way of doing things because we really didn't have that before. I mean, that's really within the last 5 years that we really started getting that data, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And the cool thing about this AI stuff is it actually learns and evolves over time and it makes recommendations. So if I have a sales team of 20 sales reps, let's say, or 10, it doesn't really matter the number, but it'll start detecting patterns and start recording and tracking what the top performers are doing consistently that may not be in the sales training book. And that's important for everyone to know. Like I actually wrote a 180-page sales training book. It's my Bible of in-home selling, and it has a lot of comprehensive information on every step of the sales process. But at the same time, I always think of this sales training book as the box. Here's your box. Now, of course, the box is important. That's your foundation. But what are the outside the box creative things the sales professionals are doing in the heat of the moment to have consistent results? Because again, there's so many situations that these salespeople get thrown into. You can't possibly write a script on every single one of them. I mean, some of the stories I have personally of the situations I ran into and how I was able to overcome and sell them, like you can't train it, but AI can notice those things. They can detect patterns and record that and serve it up as a sales training exercise for the rest of the team.
Yeah.
So the way this can help snowball the collective knowledge base of an entire sales team is absolutely astounding. And the cool thing is like when I'm looking at all this data, I can also detect patterns, areas of improvement amongst my team. You know, we're doing these things great. Here's the areas that we definitely need to improve on. And now because I have the visibility in the data, I can craft amazing sales meetings, sales training agendas. The role playing that I'm doing is based on what my team truly needs. So it takes sales coaching and sales leadership to a whole different level of visibility and effectiveness. Because previously, before that 5 years ago, like you're referencing, salespeople had to, or excuse me, sales coaches would listen to what the salesperson thought happened on the sales encounter, which shockingly is not always the truth.
Yeah.
Salespeople tend to make a lot of excuses because they're salespeople, right? They don't necessarily tell everything exactly the way it happened. But then try to navigate through that in a secondhand way to try to craft sales training and sales meeting agendas and role playing exercise for my team when I never actually see them play the game. So this is one thing I admire about the way Rolla explained this. Imagine coaching a football team or a baseball team. You're there at practice with them. You do all the drills for skills, repetition, repetition, but then you never once go watch them play a live game. You
Yeah.
just sit that one out. You're just at home watching TV, right? So it's going to be really difficult for you to continue to coach and improve your team if you never watch them play. So now with technology and data, we can watch every single person, how they're playing the game and course correct specifically to that individual every step of the way. So it's absolutely empowering as a sales trainer and sales leader.
There is a question that I want to ask you, which is very specific to motivational speaking or public speaking, which I think is really important for a lot of people that watching that want to get into it or want to continue improving. And now
Yes.
I've watched many motivational speakers on YouTube, and there's one person, I can't remember his name, but he spoke about giving yourself permission. And he was explaining that the most efficient people, or the reason why people in the army or the armed forces are so proficient in what they do is because they know how to give themselves permission. And so they're able to go in a situation very bold, of course. And when they are underperforming, they will fall back on their training.
Yep.
Now, would you have what could you say in regards to giving yourself permission when you're on stage to be yourself and give your most bold performance? Because that's very important for people to know when they get up on stage, because I know you follow Jocko Willink's
Yep. Yeah.
motivation speaking. Okay, Jocko Willings is a bit of a tough act to follow, and that man certainly knows how to give himself permission. So can you speak to a little bit of that, of how you give yourself permission or how you train, your sales professionals, how to give themselves permission when they come up on stage or when they're doing a sale?
Yeah, I mean, we one thing that the quote I like is you don't necessarily rise to the occasion, you fall to your highest level of preparedness, right? And the more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in battle. So I'm a firm believer of those things. And of course, there's no way you can fully prepare for everything that you can come across in terms of getting, public speaking. But my first event that I did at Grosso University, it was our first ever closers camp, was in 2019. And of course, I'm used to training maybe a dozen salespeople at a time, talking to, a handful of people, a room full. But this is my first time speaking in front of like 300 people.
Yeah.
So of course, leading up to that event, I had a little anxiety, it was nerves. I was getting a little uncomfortable, a little anxious about it. And I'm like, man, do I need like a shot of tequila or something? Like, I gotta relax my nerves. So knowing that I was going to be nervous, I'm like, I'm going to be nervous. That's just the end of it. I don't care. I'm like, I got to do something to get in the right state. Kind of like in sales, before I went into every house, I tried to get in the right state. And I would say this mantra to myself over and over, like, I'm going to give them the best presentation they've ever seen in their life. And I'm going to make these homeowners feel like the most important people in the world for the next 2.5 hours. So those are the things I used to tell myself, and it's to get in the right state of mind. But I planned this out in advance that I was going to open up Closers Camp with a huge icebreaker. And the icebreaker was to benefit the audience, but mostly to benefit me so I could get relaxed, like get in the right state. So my icebreaker was I came out in front of everybody and sang the national anthem, which is fine, nothing crazy, but just singing in front of a crowd. I mean, that's not common for people to do, right? And you kind of have to get outside, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable to be able to do that. And then right after the national anthem was sang, it transitioned right into me singing We Will Rock You karaoke style to Freddie Mercury and just getting everybody up screaming like, get on your feet, right? And I'm singing, we will. And the reason why I did that is because I knew if I could throw myself out there, rip the Band-Aid off
Yeah.
and sing We Will Rock You to this crowd and get fired up, the talking about sales and the rest of the event would be smooth sailing, and it works so well for me, and it allowed me to be myself because those watching this that watching that know me personally, like I love karaoke, I love going out singing, I love having a good time. I'm generally a goofy individual, right? So that allowed me to show the audience this is who I am, this is my authentic self. And I truly feel that, of course, conveying your message with passion, if you're public speaking, whatever it is, if you're passionate about it and you can speak to the audience with a genuine authenticity, be yourself, you're going to vibrate at one of the highest frequencies, most magnetic frequencies that there is. And some people claim that authenticity vibrates at a much higher frequency than even love or gratitude or anything. Because I feel like we are designed to be true to ourselves, and people gravitate and they're drawn to people that are authentic and true to themselves. So that's one thing I really try to focus on is how can I deliver the message as a class act and a professional, but be me, be as close to who I really am. And I train this more and more to salespeople. I said, don't go in there and sell a customer or a prospect. You want to communicate with these homeowners the way you would respectfully communicate to a friend.
Yeah.
That's how you want to talk to them. the way you'd respectfully communicate to one of your friends. Of course, I'm not talking about the crazy stuff you talk about with your friends and family. I'm
Yeah,
talking
yeah.
about respectfully, but allows you to really let your hair down and be yourself. And I'm not condoning this at all. And this is going to sound like completely off the wall. But I actually, early in my sales career, I had a couple nights where I stayed up too night drinking. Okay. I had a few too many cocktails, and I woke up the next morning and I didn't feel the greatest, right? A little hangover. And I remember going to run the lead that day, and I was just like, oh, I just feel terrible, whatever. But when you're hungover, you almost have this attitude like, I don't give a crap whether or not they buy from me. I just want to go take a nap.
Yeah.
But what ended up happening is, because I was going into that house, not desperate for the sale, not having commission breath, just talking to them absolutely normal. Like, I don't care whether or not you buy from me. It translated into some of the easiest sales I've ever had. People are like buying from me left and right. And again, I'm not condoning drinking and being hungover, but the whole
Yeah.
point is, one of the most important things is being authentic, being true to yourself, and the opposite of selling out of desperation. You want to communicate and sell to people like you could care whether or not they buy from you, right? Now, when I'm public speaking, one thing that helps me out tremendously is I don't look at the whole room. A lot of people say just look over their heads and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I don't do that. What I do is I look at one person at a time. I'm having conversation with one person because, Stephen, when you meet one individual and you're just having a conversation with them, are you nervous?
No, not at all.
Of course not. You're not nervous. And let's say I'm talking to them about the Grosso sales process. Is it likely that I know the sales process better than they do? It's likely. Okay. So I'm just talking to one person at a time, knowing that I know this stuff and I'm more passionate about it than they do, more than likely. And I know they're going to take value away from what I'm about to share with them. So what do I have to be nervous about? And there's two big benefits to that I wanted to share with you is, when you talk to one person at a time and you lock eyes with them, not only is it easier for you to communicate with your audience, but your audience is going to be a lot happier. They're going to take a lot more away from the experience, because even if you lock eyes with each person for a second, everyone in the audience now feels like they're actually included in the conversation. If all you're doing is looking over everybody's heads, or you're not making eye contact with anybody, it's just as bad as going into a house and not making eye contact with your prospect. Is not good.
Yeah.
So it's two benefits there. But yeah, I just try to have lock eyes with individuals in the audience, and they feel more engaged. It makes me more comfortable. If I have 200 people, I'm having 200 individual conversations. And it sounds overly simplified, but for me, that helps me get in the right state, calm my nerves, and just make this thing as genuine and authentic as I can.
That's
So
great. There's been so much great information for the audience here. I'm going to recommend to the audience, and I hope this gets out to as many people as possible, especially in the home improvement industry. Go and check out Grosso University, because just after listening to, Dominic talk about this, it seems like an absolutely incredible program that is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's going to be
no.
continually scaling and growing. And I'm happy that you are able to, throughout this conversation, I've realized you're able to live your dream. And it's not just, it's continuing to grow more and more over time. I think it's very exciting. Just listening to you talk about it, and the passion that you have gets me excited. And I've taken a look at the website, which is going to be posted down in the comments down below. And it's very well put together. And
Yeah, and I just wanted to let the audience know, if you're in the home improvement space and you don't have a high-class sales trainer, Grosso University actually has a program called the Sales Academy Masterclass.
okay.
And essentially what that is, the second Monday of every month, we start a brand new 2-week sales training course where you can throw as many salespeople or as little salespeople as you want at us. We will train them, test them, and certify them. And we place them back into your organization with a performance guarantee. And essentially, we can become the entire training and coaching arm of your business if you don't have a full-time sales trainer. Some people throw their sales trainer into our training so they can learn the ropes on how to train. And then we empower them with sales leadership coaching to command their team after that. So anything that touches, training and growing and scaling a sales army, we're here to support you every step of the way.
Great. That's so awesome, Dominic. This has been a great podcast. I'm going to wrap it up here, but I would love to get you on sometime in the future. Thanks so much for coming on. I hope your company grows and grows. I'm going to send sales professionals and sales trainers your way and recommend Grosso University over and over. And I really appreciate this. And just going to wrap it up. So wave goodbye to the audience. Everyone go check out his podcast and his website. And I'll see you later, and I'll stop the recording.